All right, what is going on, everyone? Therapy Without a Degree, chapter 282. 282 episodes. We are here. You guys already know. Joe Fucarino is in the house, in the studio. We got Zane. Zane's on the road today. He's finding parking. He's on the move. All right, and then we got the guys in the building. We got JoJo here. We got Javi in the building, our production team. And then we have a very special guest, a legend, okay? This guy has helped millions and millions of people. He's helped me so much, and it's just an honor to have you on, and I want to say thank you from the start. Can you introduce yourself to the people, Shawn?
The Jay-Z bar just jumped into my head, allow me to reintroduce myself.
Let's go.
Man. I appreciate you guys having me on. First and foremost, the fact that you are inching towards 300 episodes, like that's remarkable. It's truly remarkable to have that kind of dedication to anything in today's kind of current cultural structure is really special. So huge shout out to you guys for that. And, as you mentioned, being able to impact the lives. And sometimes the word millions is thrown out there a little bit flippantly. But, that's real, with my show, with my, my books. And I don't sometimes understand the impact until situations like, this guy who's a leading regenerative medicine doc who graduated maybe 8 years ago. And he read my book during his residency. And he's been utilizing that data he learned from me 8 years ago in his practice. And now he's on all of these different shows, and he's doing the media, and he's, treating the owner of the Burj Khalifa and Tony Robbins and all these guys. It's just like, you don't really understand the impact that you can have and the trickle down effect of that. And, I got into this field, and first of all, my name is Shawn Stevenson. And I got into this field just, I've always been interested in performance, athletics, just kind of like a neighborhood legend, hooping and, playing football and things like that. But, I'm from St. Louis, and, that scenario of like the basketball hoop is like a crate on the pole. Like we really did that. I was like, we played basketball in the alley, and everybody had a nickname in our neighborhood, super random stuff, Turk and Frog and Pig. And just growing up in this really interesting environment where there is a lot of poverty, and this is a glorified food desert. It has a term today, which I don't like that term because it presents a little bit of kind of an erotic nature to it. Like, it's a food desert, like some kind of extravagant terminology putting desert on something. But there's nothing beautiful about it really when it comes to the food situation. But the other side is the beauty that we have collectively as a community. And, it's so cool to be able to talk to you guys because you're tapped into what I'm tapped into, which is that culture that I come from is now integrated itself into the world culture. The culture of poverty, hustle, figuring things out, creativity, and this kind of, this also the music, the lifestyle, the fashion, all these things are like, K-pop is doing, like it's talking like us. It's really remarkable to see that. But in the environment itself, and part of the reason why it's so infectious is that when you don't have anything, it fosters this very powerful character trait of creativity, of making something out of nothing, of finding a way, and of, really trying to, if I could just put into one term, uh, everything is really figure outable. To shout out to Marie Forleo, everything is figure outable. We can find a way. Yeah. But sometimes because of our limited environmental reach or perspective, we're limited in our thinking about what we can create, and our creativity is boundless, and so I'm like a lot of people from St. Louis, we don't tend to go anywhere. All right. I didn't get on a plane until I was 25 years old. It was the first time I ever got on a plane. It's not that I didn't necessarily want to see some other things. It's just like, it wasn't a part of my paradigm. And so going from living in that environment and growing up in that environment, again, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of dysfunction and disease, addiction, even in this situation I'm talking about where the crate in the alley, we live right next door to the drug spot, and it's a really interesting place to grow up, obviously complicated, but as I mentioned, there's a lot of beauty to behold as well. And so, but fast forward that story, coming from that environment, getting an opportunity to, quote, go to the good school and being bussed out. I was part of the desegregation program. That was still the name, the deseg program, getting bused to the schools in like Chesterfield and Baldwin and really, really nice schools, and being able to play sports at schools that are known to churn out professional athletes, right? So one of my linemen that blocked for me was Ryan Howard, who won the MVP for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? And so the list goes on and on with folks that have come out of the school that I went to. But for myself personally, even though, as I mentioned, he's a blocker, I didn't even know he could play baseball, and everything was really looking good for me. I was the fastest kid in the school. I ran a 4.5 40 when I was just turned 15. I was barely past 14 years old. But that season in track practice is where everything started to go downhill for me. And doing a 200-meter time trial with my coach, I broke my hip. My hip broke just from running. I didn't fall. There was no impact, that kind of thing. My bones were so brittle. I was breaking down from the inside out, and I didn't realize it. And the reason I'm here with you guys today is that I went through what's called standard of care, which is, I was given some NSAIDs, some nonsteroidal anti-inflammatories. I was told to stay off the leg. And that was that. Nobody asked. Nobody inquired, how can a 15-year-old kid break his hip from running? That is usually relegated to people decades older, that they're going to break a hip. And it wasn't until about half a dozen more injuries later, and I couldn't stay healthy. I couldn't stay on the football field. I couldn't stay on the track. I just kept on getting injured. At the age of 20, I was diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, which is spinal degeneration. So it wasn't just my bones, but my spine itself. And so I was in a lot of pain. And, obviously my aspirations for, playing at the top level were just vanquished. And obviously there's a happy ending to this story, because through that process of breakdown, I was able to eventually lift myself up. At this point, I lived in Ferguson, Missouri. Most of my adult life, I actually lived in Ferguson and Florissant, Missouri. And even in that condition, which Ferguson is kind of like, it's well known now about some of the situations in Ferguson, but this is one of the top, if we're going to use this label one more time, food deserts in the world. And particularly in the United States. Let me caveat that. And the world is different, because poverty here in the United States is different from poverty other places. Poverty in the US, you still probably got a car, you still probably got a TV, where other, countries might be trying to get by on $1 a day. Yeah. So just to keep that in perspective. But even living in Ferguson, Missouri, I was able to understand that I had choice, that we get thrown this label, people that don't know about where I actually come from or where we come from, talking about, well, that's good for you to say people don't have access. When we start to learn about nutrition, when we start to learn about just very basic lifestyle factors that our genes expect from us for healthy expression, and talking about access, it didn't matter because just my awareness helped me to see the possibilities around me. Because here's one of the things, all this time that I was in pain and suffering living in Ferguson, there was actually a farmer's market that was there the whole time where I could save money. I could get real, fresh, nutrient-dense food. But here's the rub. It was right next to the police station. All right. And I was trying to do my best to avoid the police station. All right. But the whole time, there was a resource there for me. But because I wasn't aware that it was possible for me, I didn't know. And so learning about some of these different resources, starting to study ferociously human health and the human body. And I was in college at the time. And I eventually shifted all my coursework over. Once I realized that I could get better, despite what my well-meaning physicians were telling me, I just studied and applied everything that I could and completely transformed my health. My so-called incurable degenerative disc condition, I regenerated the tissues of my intravertebral disc, my bone density. Even today, my bone density is higher than people in their 20s. All right. It's really remarkable what took place in less than a year, completely transformed my health. And through that transformation, people saw me that went to the university that I was attending, my professors, fellow students, faculty. These folks asked me for help because they saw, like, I didn't just look like a guy that lost weight. I looked like somebody who was once, like, you could see I was outwardly very sickly. And I really wasn't even walking normally, to being somebody radiantly healthy. And that was the birthing of my career. And I was working at a university at the time. I worked at the university gym for several years. I got to work with people from all over the world, which is another superpower that I didn't realize at the time. I didn't realize this until years later, working with people from France and from India and from China and from Ethiopia, and the list goes on, and seeing these consistencies in different people, but also seeing the uniqueness of different cultures. And how to speak this language that reaches everybody's heart, because there are certain things that unite us, but also we've got to honor our uniqueness at the same time. And, through that, eventually, I working in a clinical practice as a nutritionist, I was like, I need to get this out to more people. And so I started speaking. I started the Model Health Show, my show, which we've crossed our 10-year anniversary last year. And writing books and just doing my best to get this information accessible to more people, because it's the same story that I was given, that I was supposed to believe that I didn't have access. We got this phone now. If you got a phone, you got access for free. They can click play on this and have a revelation, have an insight, be presented with some tips and some tools and some strategies and some reframing, and also being directed to resources and just most importantly, being informed that we have a choice. And so I'm very passionate about that's my story in a nutshell, and how I got into this field and how I'm here with you now.
Yeah, man, your story is absolutely amazing. And the transformation is just, I don't even know if you understand like how rare it is, like how many people are actually going to really do that and sit there and do the research to figure out like what you like, in all the interviews and everything you've said in the books is like, no, you did the research. You figured out like, what are my bones made out of? And you went from all, like, who does that? Shout out to you, man, because people don't do that. And now what you did has now, again, like back to the beginning, has helped millions of people, maybe even more. You said, I know numbers could get thrown all around, but that is just super, super powerful. And I love how you mentioned so many times your environment. And I talk about that a lot on the show, Zane, as well. And we mention about how environment is literally everything. Like you said, the farmer's market was down the block, but if it was out of sight, it was out of mind. And I one of my favorite episodes that you ever did, and it's kind of funny that we're recording this around Valentine's Day, because I want to kind of ask you this, is you said that your environment shaped your self-love, right? And, Valentine's Day is coming up. right around the block. And one thing I always try to remind people is, a lot of people sometimes get down and out around Valentine's Day. They don't have a Valentine, or, it's a rough season as far as, mental health concerns. And I always try to remind people, like, I know it may sound corny, but yo, be your own Valentine, love yourself. And, there's an episode you did about 4 or 5 years ago on self-love. Man, you had me balling in the gym on the treadmill on a random fucking Thursday night just because of how authentic and real, like, seriously, I'm sitting there balling, like, because I feel you on so many different levels. And I just want to see if you could speak to that, or really just answer, like, just seriously, man, how did your environment shape your self-love? Also, along with how you were raised, because you were raised on two different sides with your grandmother and then in your mom. Like, I relate with you a lot on that too. That's pretty much how I grew up. And people don't realize sometimes how much that really does shape you. So, like, what do you think, man? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot of our, there's some truth to this, absolutely, because whether we understand it or not, all of our cells, we have certain receptors, we have certain abilities, whether it's through our senses, whether it's through our, our nervous system, our endocrine system, to pick up data from our environment. We're doing it 24/7, 365, every microsecond. We are always picking up data from our environment. That's how we are wired. All creatures have the same, are endowed with the same capacity. But for us as humans, even though we have this very high potential for intelligence, we can become inundated and become distracted from our ability to understand, like, I am a part of my environment, right? Humans, we can cut ourselves off in a strange way. We can go, quote, indoors and cut ourselves out from the rest of the world, from nature. And the reality is we are a part of nature. So what we create is nature as well, even though it might seem if you've been to New York City, it seems very superficial or artificial, right? But even those buildings, if you want to make a comparison, when a beaver builds a dam, that's still nature, right? And we're building things as well. We could just see ourselves as big, hairy, less hairy beavers. Wait a minute, pause, never mind. All right, forget that I said that. But we can see ourselves as, we're really powerful creatures that can create things from what is here supplied to us on this planet. All right. And I'm saying all that to say that we are absolutely a product of our environment. We have no choice but to be. But what is really special about us as a species is that we're also creators of our environment. We are can be conscious creators of our environment that will inherently impact us, right? Our perspective about our potential, how we see ourselves, how we see the world around us, how we relate to other people, how we relate to ourselves. It's all going to be pulled in through programming from our environment. We pick up these messages. We have no choice but to do this as children. We are programmed to believe a certain framework of reality. But what's interesting about us as children, we also have such a high level of imagination. And it's not that it disappears when we're a kid. When we're adult, we just start to suppress it over time. But there's so much imagination because everything is so much bigger than the very small framing that we might be programmed with. And I'm saying all this to say that when it comes to our perception of ourselves and our self-value, it's going to be through our early experiences that lays down the foundation for that. And in particular, our caregivers, our relationships, with our friends and going to school and things like that, we start to, because we're tribal creatures as well, we start to put ourselves into this kind of tribal construct and trying to fit in. And why this matters is that, my friend and obviously incredibly well-known person in personal development, Tony Robbins, shared that we have these very, very specific psychological human needs. And one of those human needs is to feel a sense of significance. We all deeply, deeply need that as a person. Like, we need to feel like we matter. We need to feel like like we have a sense of value in the world. If we're lacking that, we're going to have all kinds of psychological misinterpretations from the outside world and from ourselves as well. We're going to find ourselves with a lot of symptoms that we're going to manifest when we don't have that sense of significance. And now this leads us to this self-love aspect, right? When these are just words, by the way, these are just words that we attribute to certain ways of thinking, certain behaviors. Love is so broad. It's such a big term, and it can encompass so much. That's what's really powerful about the word love. And the feeling, the energy around it itself, it is so big. But when it comes to ourselves, in our culture, we're programmed from an early age that self-love is, for some people, it is completely absent. For other people, it's last. And we're taught this backwards way. Like we express love, we see love out there. And in reality, for example, Valentine's Day is upon us. It is cuffing season still. All right. And some people have that, in love vibe going on. All right. They feel that, that chemistry with another human being, and they're in love. And because we're not aware of ourselves, we don't realize that we are creating that chemistry. It is our perception of that other person we are choosing within ourselves to feel those feelings towards that person. Right? They didn't sprinkle magic fairy dust on us to make us feel a kind of way. We are choosing that within ourselves. And it's our choice to see the beauty in them, the potential in them. We're choosing to see love, right? But we don't need the person to do that. But we're programmed in our culture that we need that other person because of, entertainment, books and things like that. And of course, love is very powerful when you have another person. But we're taught about romanticism. It's a romantic kind of love, the Notebook and, all these Disney fairy tales and all this stuff. But the most important source of love is oneself, because that's where love really is springing from, our experience of love. And so if we can reframe it, because we tend to put ourselves last, if we can reframe it into fill up our own cup, so to speak. And another friend of mine, Lisa Nichols, says that, to fill up our own cup so that we can give from our overflow, right? So as we're filling that cup up, it's going to start to spill over at some point. And when you give from there, then you don't deplete yourself. And so often, I know this is true for me. I know we've all probably done this before, especially if people have kids. We tend to just keep giving and giving and giving, extracting from our cup and leaving ourselves depleted. And this is no way to be. It's so silly. It's very idealistic. We do have our kind of primitive, protect our kids and that kind of thing. We don't live in those conditions anymore. We live in a situation where we have a lot of structure. For the majority of us, especially in developed countries, there's a high degree of certainty and safety and these different things. And we can make more evolved decisions. And even today, right before we got on this interview today, I made sure I went to the gym. I took care of myself. But I told you guys before we got started, I got my son's basketball game got rescheduled. Like, I got to take care of my boy, but I got to take care of myself first. Because yes, he needs me, but I'm going to be able to put myself in position to be there for so much longer and to show up so much better by taking care of myself. And the last thing I want to say on this, and there's so much, we could just talk the whole time about this. The last thing that I want to say on this is, how do you do it? How do you actually express self-love or self-value? And I'll tell you, it is one of the most challenging things to do, especially in our world today, because we're so distracted. We're so distracted. One of my favorite ways of developing more self-love and self-value, it's actually instead of doing a certain thing, it's not doing a thing. And what that thing is, which is going to reach over for, because it's always close to us, this device, all right, this phone, this supercomputer that we all have in our pockets. And I just saw Nikki, shout out to Nikki with ETA. She was testing out the goggles, all right, the virtual reality goggles. And it's just getting more and more and more integrated into our environment, into our culture, where we are pulling ourselves away from ourselves. And so one of my favorite strategies is to first thing in the morning is to give yourself time to be screen-free, tech-free. What we tend to do, and I know you guys know this, we tend to jump on the phone, check our messages, hop on, Instagram or whatever the case might be, see what's going on in the world. And our fingers just do it. We might tell ourselves not to do it, but we just scroll, boop, boop, it's open. The app is open. And now you are getting inundated with what the rest of the world is doing. It's the opposite of self-love, right? Your attention is getting pulled into other people's reality. And understanding, like, you're seeing a highlight reel most of the time of what folks are up to. And then the human brain is going to start to measure ourselves against other people. That is not self-love. And so taking that time in the morning, first thing, to pour into yourself. So whether this is like taking that first 30 minutes, what I do is I get up, get hydrated, I drink some water. I might put on an inspiring message of some sort. ET is a great resource for that, or an audio book or a podcast, or nothing, or just some, maybe some meditation music, or you could meditate, you could journal, you could do some empowering, read something that fills your spirit, but do something to pour into yourself. That is an act. It's not theoretical. It is an act of love. It is an act of self-value. You are literally doing something for your betterment. And our psyche knows that, so, again, we could talk the whole time about this subject. It's pretty complicated today, unnecessarily. But it is one of the most important things that we can do, because it's just going to help us to show up. And as you guys know, just if you've been around me or part of my world, my universe, that a lot of things you don't need to say. Like, you could pick it up from my voice. You could pick it up through my character. This isn't just talk. I'm somebody who is invested in myself. And that's going to carry through, and people can pick that up, and we need that. We resonate with that today more than ever. We want to connect to something real. We want to connect to something that reminds us of how powerful we are. So,
yeah, 1,000%, Shawn. And, I want to know, with all that too, like, who taught you love? Who, I could see it, man, just, from watching your show for so many years, and, your posts on Instagram, how you love your son, how you love your wife, your community, people that you haven't even met, the passion that you put into things. I know that your love is so strong. Strong isn't even a word for it. Who taught you that, right? And who is like your role model? You're a role model for so many different people in this world, man. You're a role model to me. You're a role model as a father, as a author, as someone that's in the high level nutrition space, all these different elements. You're a huge role model. Who's Shawn's role model? Who has been your role model? Who helped you develop that, especially as a man too? That's one thing I want to say. Like, we talk about that a lot on our podcast. I like how being, emotional and showing love and being real and being authentic as a man too is, you don't really see that too often. It's always like the tough guy and this or that, or people are afraid to show love. For you, how did that happen? Who was people that maybe helped you become that person that you are today?
Yeah. Thank you for asking this, man. I'm excited to answer this question. Because any chance that I get to reflect on this, and I pretty much do this every day, because it's such a powerful catalyst for me, is reflecting on that love. And we might just, depending on our life, it might just be one small example. We all do need something for us to inspire us, but we get to pick what we choose to focus on as well. And so you mentioned this earlier. I grew up in two very different environments. And when I was in kindergarten, like 4 or 5 years old, my mom had me at 18, and my birth certificate, which is in there in my office, there isn't a father on the birth certificate. All right. And it wasn't an immaculate conception type of, but not knowing who this individual is and having a mother who's 18 years old, and she's a child herself, really, and bringing me into the fold, bringing me into the world, and not really, at certain instances, not being able to take the best care of me. And there was a time when eventually she met my stepfather when she was young. Maybe she was, we'll say, 19. But there was a time when they didn't have a place to stay. And so all of these little situations led to me staying with my grandmother. And I'm biracial. I'm an OG biracial kid, growing up in the 80s. And there wasn't very many of me. There wasn't many people that looked like me. I went to an all-white school when I lived with my grandmother. Not all white, but we'll say 98% white. And, I didn't know that I was different, but the environment let me know eventually that I was different. But in that environment with my grandmother, and if my mother were to tell this, my grandmother wasn't the best mother. But many people have this experience of when they become a grandparent, it's a chance for them to do better. And so she took that opportunity and she made my life magical. She celebrated me. She made me feel like I was the most important person in the universe, that I mattered, and we also had a very structured lifestyle. We had routines, morning routines and evening routines. And there was just a very strong sense of consistency and safety. And when I would go to stay with my mom, like on the weekend, sometimes I would sleep on the floor. It was mouse traps and roaches and, and violence in the household. My stepfather was always drinking, and, both of them just chain smoking as well. And just, it was dark. I didn't like going, but I knew that was my mom, my stepdad. It's just a part of my life. But I felt much more at peace when I was with my grandmother. And so I had this very distinct universe hopping back and forth. So that was my white grandmother, by the way. And going from that, and by the way, with that being said, I remember this feeling with my grandmother that I feel every day, that she saw me. She saw me and she valued me and she held me close. My mother didn't hug me until I was an adult. All right. And I'm not to say like it wouldn't be like a random thing, but like that in a way that I can remember. But because my mom is in this environment where I have to be tough or I will not survive, she was trying to make sure that her son is going to be able to survive in a very harsh reality. Yeah. And so just prior to moving with my grandmother, actually, when I was in preschool, I kept getting into it with the kid next door. This is when I was still living with my mother. We lived in this 4-family flat, South St. Louis, who's not a good area to be in. And I kept getting into it with this kid next door. And sometimes, kids would play or whatever. And shout out to Alfonso. All right. I still remember my man's name, but he was like he was a bigger kid. Maybe he's like in 1st or 2nd grade, and we played, but we kept on getting into it. And so my mother and his caretaker, I don't know if it was his mom, his auntie, they decided to make us fight each other. All right. I'm a baby, man. I'm like 4 years old. And they basically have us like a dog fight. And within seconds, and I still got this huge scar on the back of my head to this day. Within a few seconds, he pushed me into the corner of a brick wall, split my back of my head wide open. And, but I felt so bad that I let my mom down, because, even when I was getting wheeled in on the gurney to get stitches, I'm like, I'll get him, Mom, I'll get Alfonso. And when I got back, he was outside playing, I'm not proud of this, but, I took my revenge. And that was the environment. But shortly thereafter, that could be one of those other leading moments to me living with my grandmother. And so I'm sharing this perspective to say, like, I was in two very distinct, different environments. And eventually with my grandmother, my grandfather, heart disease, multiple heart attacks. This is the 80s, and, all this ultra processed food, even being recommended by his physician for him to eat ultra processed food, partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, country crock, things that make cardiovascular health worse. He had high blood pressure. He went from that to having a heart attack, and doing what the doctor said to do, by the way. But they had to move. They moved back to the quote country, where it was a much more slow life. He could fish and hunt and just kind of live as he did growing up. And that meant I had to move back with my mom. And this is where everything got really real, school lunch program, inner city, drugs, gangs, all of this stuff becomes a part of my daily life. And even through that, and this is the point, even through all of that, I pressed it down. I didn't want to acknowledge how much love I received from my grandmother because it was gone. All right. And that happens for some people. Some people never have the experience. My little brother didn't live with my grandmother. So for him, it's just like, I never had it. For me, I'm like, I had it and it was taken away from me. Which one's worse? It isn't a measuring competition. Again, it isn't about that, trying to measure your life to somebody else's. It's what do you choose to focus on? And so when I transformed my health, when I was living in Ferguson, the catalyst for doing that was my grandmother. Me, after all those years, remembering how much she loved me and how much she saw the potential in me to be great. And here I was, giving my potential away, sitting on the sidelines, giving up. But it was just having that one person who saw greatness in me. Now, again, some of us never have that. But today, more than ever, we got this incredible community of people. Communities like this, somebody is going to see that greatness in you. But you got to show up. You got to present yourself. Allow yourself to be seen. Share your voice. There's somebody that can inspire you. And, you guys know the root of inspiration. It's in spirit. Yep. It's in you. And you can't run from that. It's just who you are. It's a part of you. But being able to see that, to acknowledge that, and here's to answer your question formally, that extension for me, it wasn't just about extending the love that I received from my grandmother, teaching me how to love, and also seeing her relationship with my grandfather. They're the only people that I know that were actually in a healthy relationship. I've never met, well, not never, my recent adulthood, yes, but I just didn't see that. I didn't see any examples of a healthy relationship, but seeing that love that they had for each other. And it's not just that extension of that love, but also, this is a very important thing, especially if you feel like you haven't had much experience with love. Another great teacher on how to love is how you were not loved, right? Contrast. Because for me, my stepfather, and again, I get to see the story. That's why I'm in peace right now. He just passed away a couple months ago. He was in assisted living community for almost 12 years because he developed epilepsy from crack cocaine. And seeing the evolution or devolution of him, and seeing at the funeral all these stories of people coming up and speaking on his behalf, sharing stories about how he always made people laugh, how kind he was, and how much he loved food. He was actually a chef, and they saw that childlike nature that I saw, that I decided to focus on, because I also saw the abuse. I saw all of it. Any holiday, the police are coming to the Stevenson house. It's just automatic. We just thought it was normal. And I got to experience, number one, and I have this with my kids. He's the first adult. I mean, he's the first person I ever saw that beat a video game. You know, it's Mike Tyson Punch Out. All right. I told you, you know, I grew up in the 80s. All right. So Mike Tyson's Punch Out, he wanted to play this video game and he beat the video game. I thought it was impossible. Right. And we had that, you know, connection where we could play video games together, you know, and, you know, he's kind of, you know, he just always cracking jokes, finding funny things. We do that as a clan, you know, the Stevenson family. We have that. We picked that up from him. You know, all the negative things that I could talk about, that's what I chose to pull and to carry with me. And it's a great Bruce Lee quote. And I'm just going to summarize it, is to take whatever is useful and discard what is not. Right. And that's what I chose to do. Whereas, you know, with my siblings, and this is real talk, they lived that life where they were constantly getting drunk, even to this day. The drug abuse, the physical abuse and altercations, all the domestic stuff. It's for years. It's on repeat. It's on repeat. And for me, it's about, quote, breaking the cycle. There wasn't even for me, it wasn't even a choice. I got the contrast. I saw what happened and I'm like, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to be that. And so you can use those examples and to say, all right, same thing. He told me he loved me like maybe once, you know, whenever he was like right at that right part of like happy drunk to more violent, you know, it's like, I love y'all. You know? Yeah. And, but not having that love, that closeness with my father, you know, and he stepped in as that role. He's the only father that I ever knew. You know, I was definitely lacking a sense of, you know, of course, like we want to make your father proud. We want to feel like we're strong enough, like we're a man ourselves. And to not have that approval, have that kind of connection, I made sure, again, I got contrast. I've poured that into my sons. And you see how they show up in the world and the impact that they're making. You know, my son just this past weekend, my youngest son, they had, you know, he's in AAU basketball and he's 12 years old. And he's only been playing for 1 year. We just crossed his 1 year anniversary. And this is real talk. This is real talk. At this tournament, the dads are coming over, patting me on the shoulder, dapping me up. I'm like, I'm not out there playing like that. My son is different. He's different. Yeah. And the coach actually, before we got started, the coach just texted me and he actually called my son and went to FaceTime him because he wanted to share how proud he is of my son, because these other kids have been playing sometimes since they was like 4, 5, 6 years old. He's been playing for 1 year and he was the MVP of the tournament this past weekend. And it wasn't about, it's not a skill thing. It's a heart thing. It's an effort thing. It's an upliftment thing. Yeah. And that's a part of our culture. And he knows at the end of the day, whether he wins or loses, I'm going to love the shit out of him. I've got his back and he's loved. So he doesn't have to worry about that. He can just go out and express himself and contribute, because he's going to be in an environment where we're just constantly pouring into him and letting him know that he matters. Yeah. And so that was a lot, man. That's a powerful question, man.
But I love it though, man, because it is 100% real. And like you said, you mentioned it a few times, is that sometimes you got to remind them that they matter and that we matter, and all of us does. You know, I know we got to wrap up soon, so I just did want to ask you, you know, you mentioned like routines, especially like with your grandmother, routines and how that helped you. And now I know you mentioned it a lot, especially in the book, about how like an old routine that kind of is very slept on nowadays, that we're not really doing too much of, is eating together as a family. Can you speak a little bit on that? And then I also kind of wanted to know, like you were mentioning, you were talking about like the drug abuse and what's like your nowadays I feel like cannabis is being very over popularized, and you're seeing like a dispensary in every single corner. Like, what's kind of your take on that, and what is it doing to us, to our bodies, to our health? So I don't know how you would want to tie those two things in. It's before we go, I was really I was wondering, I'm curious about your
Of
input.
course, of course. And by the way, from the time that I shared, I've got extra 10 minutes
Let's
for
go.
this message. So now, cannabis, marijuana is such a hot button issue, like for real, you know. This is even more than politics. You know,
Yeah.
people get into their camps with weed. It's just, I grew up in an environment where this was pervasive,
Mm.
pervasive. All right. And also today, the person who even wrote, you know, the cover quote from my last book, which is USA Today national bestseller, is in all the bookstores and all the things, Dr. Daniel Amen, he is the most renowned neuroscientist who's actually taking imaging of the human brain. It's called SPECT scans, and looking at, you know, blood flow, looking at function, electrical activity, all these different things, and looking at people's brains. And he shared to me he's working to be as unbiased as he can, and that's what's unique about him. But people might not know that from an Instagram clip. I don't think he cares much if weed is good or not, but he's looking at the impact on the brain. And he's just shared with me time and time again. And there are several studies that just came out in 2022, you know, population studies. And, you know, but again, even with population studies, for me, because I'm a scientist, I understand like we might not have necessarily like a ward study, like a long-term randomized controlled trial, but we can have studies that are, you know, longitudinal studies where we are following people and behavior for long periods of time and see what the outcomes are. So we can do better tracking. And some of these studies have done that. And just finding that, yes, especially, here's the key. This isn't to say that it doesn't have its value, but especially for the developing brain. All right. It is well noted, well established, multiple peer-reviewed studies in some of the most prestigious medical journals. And you know how I do it. If I had this teed up, I'd have 10 studies for you teed up
20
and
of
ready
them.
to go. But, you know, of course, people could check out my show. I do talk about these different subjects, but finding that there is, in fact, a significant higher rate of psychosis for people that are using marijuana, especially habitually when they're younger, right? So teens in particular, in these new studies that are coming out. And so, and the thing is, like, we know that, but we start to jump into our camp, like, no, you don't understand. This is all, no, we're talking about the developing brain of a child. And to think that it is a very hormonally active substance. It is going to impact your, you know, your endocrine system, your nervous system, you know, your neurotransmitters, your lung function, obviously. And all of that is talking about your bloodstream, blood supply to your brain. It is going to be impacted. And in particular, we're seeing, again, higher rates of psychosis, development later. All right. But some people might, the whataboutism, well, they probably had psychosis anyways, but the weed helped. No, this is actually factoring in for these different things to see, like, okay, the behavior is implemented and here's the outcome to the best of the researcher's abilities. Because this is a very difficult thing to track. Now, again, I'm going to say this. It's been around for thousands of years. All right. This isn't all bad. But in particular for the developing brain, we need to be much more mindful of this and understand, again, yes, it's legalized here. I'm in LA, so you could barely go anywhere. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna see this. It's very pervasive. But also seeing this firsthand with several young people in my life, and even more recently, even over the summer, and one of them getting into a car accident because they were smoking and driving and almost dying, and sharing, like, this is his words. I don't know why people say this isn't addictive. He's like, I can't stop. He's like, I keep trying to stop. And so we know that there is an addictive quality to it. And anything that takes that kind of control in our lives, we need to question it as well. And there are some people that can relate with these things very efficaciously, but we got to understand we're all unique. And so I hope that people listen to that with compassion, because there are some benefits with helping to reduce anxiety, with helping to, reduce pain, and so many other things that we have peer-reviewed data on. But most people are not getting high for that purpose. All right. That's just the reality, but we justify it. It's like red wine. It's like, well, it's got the resveratrol. It's good for, longevity. Bruh, most people are not drinking wine trying to get resveratrol.
No.
Let's just be honest. And also the amount that's in there that is therapeutic is, you'd have to drink multiple bottles to get something that actually is going to provide a therapeutic. And some people are like, well, I'll do it. You could just take a resveratrol supplement, or you could take, a hemp supplement, if you're looking for these particular factors. But it's a practice as well. It is a ritual. There's a change in feeling. For some people, they can have a reduction in anxiety. For some people, it can exacerbate anxiety, and we see these cultural things, but then we ignore them. Like, this concept of us, feeling more anxiety and freaked out when somebody gets high, right? Or the relationship with food changes, for example. Like, that's powerful. That is very, very powerful. And so I hope people didn't check out on that one, because again, it's very complex to talk about.
Yeah.
To turn the page, and we could do the whole conversation just on that piece. I'm coming from the perspective of a scientist, of my associate who is looking at the human brain and seeing blood flow reductions in parts of the brain that relate to executive function, right? So like decision-making, social control, distinguishing between right and wrong, forethought, the ability to like plan things out and understand consequences. Those parts of the brain are getting suppressed if we're getting high, in particular, if we're getting high a lot. And we kind of know that. And that's okay. That's okay. So, wow. I was not expecting to talk about that, but like I said, to circle back, because at the dinner table is really where we can have these conversations, right? And this is another, like the dinner table is a unifier, and it's a certain thing that's been taken out of our culture recently, because we don't want to villainize anything. We don't want to villainize even things that we know are harmful. We want to be able to have a rational, healthy conversation about them. And most things are not all bad or all good, but also we want to be careful about this term, everything in moderation, because crack in moderation will fuck you up. I lost my stepfather. I lost his older brother, my Uncle Danny. I lost so much because of, thinking that certain things, I got this, I can manage this. No, certain things, it's not okay in moderation. It's all context dependent. That's the key. With marijuana, it's context dependent. All right. I don't want to villainize it. There's value there, but there's also danger. And if you're on either extreme, then you're lying to yourself. It's context dependent. And to have these conversations where we traditionally would get together as a tribe and connect and celebrate and talk and share stories was around the act of eating together. And, the most recent data is affirming that this might be the highest leverage point for family wellness. And I'll just give a few examples. So one study was conducted by researchers at Harvard, and they were tracking family eating behaviors and food choices for years and years and years. And they found that families that eat together on a regular basis ate significantly higher amounts of real whole foods. So fruits and vegetables, minimally processed foods. And here this by nature, they were consuming significantly higher amounts of essential nutrients that protected those family members from chronic diseases. They also noted they ate significantly less ultra processed foods, in particular chips and soda, and trans fat and other nutritive things that are known to cause disease. All right. But not to, again, we're not here in that playing that game. We're not villainizing ultra processed foods. We know, Lucky Charms is not that good for us, but it's a thing. It's a vibe. And if you're in that vibe, so be it. But understand that that is not real food. That is all synthetic, highly refined ingredients that are not that good for our health over a long period of time. But if you have an interaction with the bowl of cereal every now and then, you're not going to die. As a matter of fact, it might bring joy to your life. Context dependent. On a consistent basis, though, if we're eating together, we're going to make better food choices. So that's number one. Number two, a study that was published in the journal Pediatrics, looking specifically at the health outcomes for our kids, found that when families eat together 3 or more times a week, the children in those families have a significantly lower incidence of obesity and disordered eating. And another study that was conducted on office workers at IBM found that for adults, when parents were able to make it home on time on a regular basis to have dinner with their families, their work stress stayed negligible. Even if things were intense at work, they were able to metabolize the stress. Their work morale stayed high, productivity, all those things. But as soon as things cut into their ability to eat dinner with their families, stress started to become dominant, and they were not able to process the stress efficiently. Work morale goes down, productivity goes down, job satisfaction goes down. And most importantly, and this is according to JAMA, this is the Journal of the American Medical Association, the study was published in JAMA. They found that today, here in the United States, upwards of 80% of all doctor visits are for stress-related conditions. Stress is killing us. And eating with people that you care about is a way to neutralize, to process stress. Shown in the data again and again and again. And I've got more studies on this in the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook, as you know, in particular looking at minority children that are generally in the context of a low-income environment, which is where I come from. Because again, I'm looking at the arguments from people who don't know about the environment itself. They're speaking superficially because of what they see on the news, or they're trying to be a social justice, person. I respect that. I appreciate that. But if you don't really understand, don't speak on my potential. All right. And so what these researchers found was that even for these minority children, if they ate a meal with their family, and it could be any meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, didn't matter, 4 meals per week, those children ate an average of 5 servings of fruits and vegetables 5 days a week, and significantly less ultra-processed foods, chips and soda. And the researchers noted in particular if the TV wasn't on during family meals. All right, so it's really interesting how that works. And we grew up in the TV culture. You know what I'm saying? I'm not exaggerating. I can count on my hands how many times I sat down and ate a meal with my family. Stepfather, mother, brother, sister. I ate with my brother and sister a lot, but not my parents. And a lot of times we just grab food and find some place to sit. Right? It's kind of grab and go. And but I had that structure with my grandmother. A lot of days I sat there at the table, in particular with my grandfather, because my grandmother was usually doing something, whipping up some stuff. But you see the difference as well in our connection. And so this shines a subtle but bright light on the fact that even if we're in a low-income situation, eating together is protective for our health. Fact. All right. And plus, and now let's talk about really quickly why. Number one, just logically, there's going to be a modicum of like planning. If we know, for example, we eat family dinners on Monday, Wednesday, and then brunch on Sundays, it's in the back of your mind. You're going to plan for it. Or what are we going to eat? And it's generally going to be a more well-constructed meal. All right. But let's look at what's going on behind the scenes. When you're with people that you love, people that you care about, when you sit down to eat together, you're automatically producing more, in particular, oxytocin. And oxytocin has gained this nickname as the love hormone or cuddle hormone. All right. And oxytocin is well established to neutralize the activity of cortisol. It's kind of glorified stress hormone. So it instantly starts to metabolize and reduce stress. And there's a shift that takes place from our sympathetic fight or flight nervous system to the parasympathetic. And the nickname of that one is the quote, rest and digest nervous system. All right. So we're digesting our food better. We're assimilating nutrients better. All this stuff is now being seen in the data. Our nervous system is shifting over. We're just in a healthier state when we slow down to sit and eat with people that we care about. So now, if that isn't a part of your culture right now, and I just saw an incredible teacher at my son's school came up to me who has a copy of the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook. And he came over, he just let me know because he wasn't doing this on a regular basis. He was all about his family, but they weren't eating together. And he was like, Shawn, so we already figured. This was like maybe a month after I saw him and I knew that he had the book. He was like, my family and I, we got 2 days, Shawn, 2 days a week we've made sacred and we're eating together. He said, maybe, sometimes 3 days, but at least 2 days a week we all sit down and eat together. Because also he had a new younger baby too. And sometimes like one of the parent is kind of caretaking the baby, it's just, but he's like, we just didn't know that how valuable this was, right? So I've got a bunch of strategies on how to implement this in a fun way, because this is the thing too, if you got kids and this hasn't been a part of your reality, they have their own agendas, so we have to make it, something that is fun and rewarding as gaming might be or whatever they was doing before that. And there's a ton of ways to do that. I'm telling you this from experience as a parent and, and seeing so much more joy come from that. And last thing, I want to share this with you guys because I just saw a clip with my guy, Shawn T, was on this particular show. So one of the things that just kind of manifested in our culture, a culture of play, years ago, we just somehow, some way, during dinner, after dinner, before we moved to LA, this was like, we'll just say maybe 2017, we start doing this. For some reason, somehow, some way, we end up like freestyling at during dinner or after dinner. And whether it's like kind of battling each other, we got so much video. I saw last week, my wife had all these recordings. I had no idea. Even with my youngest son, he was like, 6, 7 years old and like doing his little bars. And, it just became this thing, like this expression, it feels good to create as well. And it's just like, for them, it's anchoring in this experience. When I eat dinner with my family, creativity is going to happen, right? Or, expression's going to happen. Fun's going to happen. We got to a place where, my son had an iPad. We make little beats on the iPad, somebody make a beat. And then, we eventually got like a microphone we're passing around as well. That led to, and this is real talk, while I'm sharing this with you guys, I had no idea this was going to happen. When the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook came out, the day that it came out, I was at Sway in the Morning in New York. Yep. And this is an iconic show in hip hop. I came there to talk about nutrition and wellness. My son, when he met Sway, my oldest son, he dapped Sway up and he said, my dad can freestyle. I had no idea, bro. The interview was over. I'm like, oh man, that was powerful. And I'm just sitting back chilling. And then we're going out. Sway's standing up. He's getting hype. They put a beat on. And I'm just like, what's going on? Okay, yeah. And you can see it. If you see the video, you see my face. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And Sway's like, I heard there's a healthy hyena or something. Well, I don't know what something like that. Shawn, and I was like, oh, okay. And I literally, if you listen back,
I remember that.
Yeah, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. All right. And then I just spit some bars off the top of my head, what was going on in the room. The room was going crazy, man. The room was going crazy because, of course, just the week before, like LL Cool J was there, freestyle. You know what I'm saying? Common, like you name it. This is so iconic. But I'm not there for that. And so for this nutritionist to have some bars and some capability to do that at the drop of a dime, but my family culture co-created that moment. It created that moment. I had no idea my son told him that until we left. I didn't come there for that, like I said. But your family culture My point being that your culture, your family culture, affects the world around you. Where you go, you take your culture with you. We've been led to believe that the culture out there is the only source of culture is going to control you and control your life, because our culture is controlling how we think about ourselves, the choices that we make. To define culture, it's the thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, and actions of a group of people that is then passed on from one generation to the next. That's what culture is. And we get to decide what our culture is within our own household. That's where our real power is. And it's infectious. It's infectious. We can help change our community by changing what's happening inside of our own doors. And so that's the mission, that's the message. And, I appreciate you guys so much for having me on to talk about it.
Thank you so much, man. I have one final quick question before we go. Let's just say your daughter and your two sons are watching this, and let's just say 70 years and you're not here no more. What's a message you have for them? Because, maybe in 70 years from now, they're watching old videos of you and interviews of you. What's a message you want to give to your children?
Mm. What's coming up for me is that there's nothing for me to say. My life and how I treated them speaks for itself. I would maybe say that I hope that I extended and let you know how valuable you are, how much you matter, and also those times when I stepped back and also allowed you to figure things out and to fail and to grow into your power, that even those times were all filled with love. And yeah, I mean, that would be it, man. Just, I would hope that my life is a reflection of the message. There wouldn't be anything else left to say.
It's amazing, man. Again, thank you so much. Everyone, tap in, get Eat Smarter Family Cookbook, get Sleep Smarter, get Eat Smarter. Tap in with Shawn. This is just a 0.5% of value that he adds within everything. Like, this doesn't even come close to the surface of all the value that you add in all of our lives. I personally consume your content daily. Like I said, again, a huge role model to me, taught me so much. And for people that are listening, it's beyond, health and nutrition. It's family. It's everything. It's so many different things. Again, you're such a role model. Keep it up. Never, ever, ever stop, no matter what, Shawn. Because, while you're helping all these people, don't forget, there got to be people there for you as well, too. While you're being a role model there for everybody else, it's like when Superman was picking up Lois, she's like, you got me. Who got you? And I think a lot of us in this space that we're just, out there helping people, trying to inspire people and do the best we can. Sometimes it's tough because it's like, you got to make sure you're good as well, too. So I'm glad we spoke on a lot of the self-love stuff, and tap in with his content, learn from him. Again, even with me, like, it's small, like you said, a lot of times it's small steps. I always believe small steps, great distances. I learned so much from this individual. But can I do everything all tomorrow? No, I add little elements. I add this, I add that. I even bought a little small 2-seater table in my kitchen, because it's like, oh yeah, you know what? We got to eat together more. Maybe we can't get a big table, but you know what? We're gonna do a small step. We didn't get that. We're gonna implement this. We're gonna implement that. So it's like small little things that will really, really change your life and make an impact. Shawn, again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful questions and allowing me to express myself and to share some things I don't normally share in this way. This has been awesome, man. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we frequent LA, man. So maybe one day in the future we'll do a part two, get down to more of the nutrition stuff and all that fun stuff in the future.
Stay tapped in. Stay tapped in, man. Absolutely. It's already done. Even this moment.